Hi everyone, welcome back to my lab and today's video, which is going to be a review and demo of all three of the brand new Huda Beauty mini neon palettes. These recently launched on Sephora.com, so I went ahead and placed my order. I created one look out of each palette for you, just so that you can get some ideas of how the eyeshadows perform. And overall, I'm ready to share my thoughts with you. Before we get started, if you enjoyed the video while you're watching, don't forget to give it a thumbs up for me and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Now let's go ahead and get started. If you saw my thumbnail, you already know that these palettes aren't exactly what I was expecting. When I saw that the palettes were going to be neon palettes, I guess I had a different image in mind. And even when I saw the palettes, I still thought that they were going to perform somewhat differently. Now, they aren't necessarily what I thought they were going to be, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad. So let me first begin by saying that the price on each of these three little guys are $29, which is $2 above the price of her other mini palettes, which are at $27 a piece. Now, that could potentially be because the packaging has been changed to a plastic packaging. It's actually quite nice. It's a neon sort of plastic packaging, and each one is themed by the color of the palette. When you open it up, you do have a very nice mirror inside, and these are your typical 9-pan eyeshadow palettes. And each pan has 1.3 grams of product, which is a pretty generous amount for such a tiny palette. In this video, of course, I'm going to show you swatches of all three of the palettes. The first one that I swatched was the neon green palette, and here's what that one looks like on the inside. Upon swatching this palette, the first thing that I noticed is that the metallic shadows, they're not really metallic shadows. They have more of a property of a topper eyeshadow, which is a little bit more translucent, and they perform better when packed on top of another color. Now, I did find that of all the eyeshadows, this yellowy green one is the one that performs most similar to a metallic shadow. The other ones are a little bit more like topper shades. Another thing that I noticed is that these metallics are a little bit more dry and gritty to the touch. They're a little bit crumbly. They do pick up fine on a brush, but they are a little bit crumbly, and as such, they perform a little bit better if you dampen your brush to avoid glitter fallout and things like that, even though it was relatively easily brushed away. The neon green palette does contain 3 mattes, and the other are shimmer or metallic shades. The next one is the neon pink, and that is what that one looks like. This is the most monochromatic of the 3 in my opinion. Now, when I swatched these, I realized that there was going to be a little bit of overlap between the shades. These two look quite similar. Even this one has a distinct similarity to the pinks as well as the purple in the palette, and it's just not that distinguishable on the eye, so those could have been replaced with other shadows, potentially a deeper purple to deepen out the outer V or something like that in the traditional ways that we do our makeup. I did like the ratio of matte and shimmers in this one a little bit more because you do have 5 mattes and then 4 shimmers. Lastly, we have the neon orange palette, and that's what this one looks like. This is the one that I thought would perform the best based on the swatches, and the one that had the most color diversity amongst the palette itself. Now, in this palette, I did find that these shades that are on the diagonal are also quite similar, and they could have been replaced with other shades, but it does help to blend out the colors a little bit better. Now, in this particular palette, you do have 6 mattes and 3 shimmers. You can probably already tell that this is the palette that I have on my eyes. When creating my looks with these palettes, I did notice that the nature of the metallics was very consistent among the 3, and that it's just that sort of gritty formula. It's a little bit crumbly if you work it with your hands, and also if you dig your brush into the pan, it's just a little bit crumbly. If you rub your brush in there a little bit too much, it starts to develop a little bit of hard pan, which you can remove right away, but you notice that crumbly nature. I was constantly blowing away little bits of the shadow, so after a while of use, you're gonna start to make a dent in these. Now, in terms of similarities to other things in my collection, the most obvious similarity would have to be with the neon pink palette and the ColourPop Ooh La La palette. So here they are side by side. And the ColourPop palette retails for $12. You could get it for less than that if you have a coupon. And one of the things that I prefer from the ColourPop palette is that there's a little bit more of a color gradient. So the ColourPop palette is going to be a little bit more versatile in terms of getting a little bit more variation in your looks. However, if we're focusing on a palette being neon, then the Huda Huda Beauty palette is definitely a lot more neon than the ColourPop palette. Another thing that came to mind when I was considering these neon palettes was the Urban Decay Electric palette. But if you take a look at this palette, the shades in here, even though some of them are similar to the shades that are in the Huda Beauty palette, these shades all have sort of a satin or metallic finish, and so the finish in the Huda Beauty of the neon matte shades would be different than anything you have in this palette. This palette, of course, is no longer available unless you can find it on sale somewhere, but it did come to mind when I was thinking about neon eyeshadows, as did the Melt Cosmetics Radioactive stack, but that one is more similar to this palette than it is to the Huda palettes. Now, as you can tell from the swatches, the matte swatch really chalky, which was not super surprising considering that they are neon shades, but I did find that they apply a lot better on the eye, specifically if you do not set your eyeshadow base. The pink pigments, even the orange ones, they will stain. I noticed that right away when I was swatching it. It was staining my arms and my fingers, and so if you want to avoid that, working with an eyeshadow base is going to help you get around that. Before we get into the looks, the last thing I wanted to mention is that these are pigment palettes, and so they're not really necessarily for use around the eye area, but that's where we're going to use them. And the reason for that is because of the staining. So that's why they're not labeled eyeshadow palettes. Now, when considering the palettes, I have to think about what I'm adding to my collection by purchasing these three palettes. And in looking at them really critically, I have to sort of prioritize them in terms of along the lines of what was probably expected when you heard the term neon palette. The one that is going to be most aligned with that kind of train of thought is going to be this one, which is the orange one. It's very much a neon palette, and the fact that it has a lot of mattes makes it a little bit different, surprisingly, especially after seeing the swatches, because I was getting worried when I swatched the palette. I find that the green one is going to be the most versatile. The color matches were selected in such a way that you can create a 3 eyeshadow look that is really cohesive and complementary, and will make it a really easy palette to wear, whether you want to go a little bit more bold or something a little bit more subdued. So for example, on my lid, I paired these 3 shades. They're very complementary. They go very easily together, but if you incorporate the peach, you can incorporate that more bronzy shade and get a different look. And so I found this palette to be slightly more versatile in terms of the looks that you are going to get. Performance-wise, I wish that there were a few mattes, and then the metallic shades are more of those topper shades. My least favorite of the 3, even though visually it's probably the most appealing, is going to be the pink one. And I just think that this is going to be the one that is going to give you the least variation in the types of looks that you're able to create, because it is so monochromatic. It is pink and purple and absolutely nothing else, which is fine. It's a very pretty palette, but again, of the 3, I think that this one is going to be the most limiting and therefore probably the least valuable in my personal collection. Not to mention, I already had this palette, and so a look that I might create with this, I could have already created with this one. Let's go ahead and get into the eye look so that you can see how the shades performed. I wasn't going for anything too crazy, just something that would demonstrate how the eyeshadows perform on the eye, so you can get an idea if this is something that you want to add to your collection. The shades don't have names, so we're going to start with the neon green shade. I primed my eyes with the MAC Soft Ochre Paint Pot. I did not set it. I'm just applying this shade all over the upper crease. I am applying it a little bit higher than my crease. I can see the shade, but it is really faint. I kind of expected that based on the swatches, how the swatches looked on my skin tone, but it could be a really good blending shade for the next deeper green that's in the palette. I'm just gonna go ahead and bring that down. It's definitely looking pastel, but a lot less chalky than I expected. Now we're gonna take the brighter neon green. Okay, this one is very pigmented. It's actually showing up like a lime green. And with one dip of the brush, I got quite a bit of pigmentation. I'm going to go ahead and bring this in the outer part of my eye as well. And then I'm going to blend that out a little bit with the original shade. For my lid, I'm going to take the shade between those two, and I'm going to apply it with a dry brush first. It's a lot more opaque on my lid than I originally expected, just again based on the swatches. I'm going to also apply it damp just to see if I can intensify it. It does intensify the shimmer nature of the shade. For the lower lash line, I'm going to use this peachy shade. I do want to apply this purpley duochrome to the lower lash line as well. I'm having trouble getting that one to show up on a dry brush, so I am going to dampen my brush. And lastly, for the inner corner and brow bone highlight, I'm going to take that center shade. Just to make the look a little bit more cohesive, I'm going to take a little bit of that peachy shade on the outer V. I'm going to finish off the look with a little bit of purple in the waterline. And this is your finished look with the neon green palette. Let's go into the neon pink palette now. I think I'll try Halo Eye with this one. Again, I primed my eyes with the MAC Soft Ochre Paint Pot and I did not set it. I'm going to start creating the basis for the Halo Eye, starting with these two shades right here, and I don't really think they're going to look that different on the eye, to be honest. This was actually a lot more pigmented than I expected. I should have used a smaller brush. I'm gonna go ahead and go into that shade now. Out of all three palettes, this one is the most monochromatic of the three. The shades are just slightly different. One is just a little bit deeper than the other, at least on my eyes. Now I'm gonna go into these two purpley shades to deepen up the inner and outer part of the eye. The mattes are actually adhering to my eye really well. Now I know that these shades do stain because they stained my arm when I was doing my swatches. So definitely use an eyeshadow base. Now I'm not going to do this in any kind of elaborate way really. I just want to create a really clean canvas in the center for the spotlight eye. So I'm just cleaning up a little bit with my MAC Paint Pot, especially since we have so much pink. And even all the shimmers are very pink. So I think I'm gonna go in with this one, which has a little bit of a duochrome nature, and see what that looks like. I'm gonna go in with my brush first. That does give me a little bit of contrast, and I'm going to apply that shade with my finger just in the center. And I'm gonna try to blend out the edges with that more purple magenta shade. I never have much luck mimicking a spotlight in the lower lash line, but I do try. So I'm just applying that same shade just underneath that spotlight with a damp brush, and then I'm just gonna blend around it. Lastly, let's run that shade underneath the lower lash line. That's the more peachy pink one that we started with. I'm gonna go ahead and use that shade, which is the lighter metallic one, for my brow bone highlight and my inner corner highlight. I'm gonna put a little bit of yellow eyeliner on just for a little bit of a pop of color. And I'm gonna finish off the look with mascara. And this is your finished look with the pink palette. Let me know which look you're liking best, whether it's the green look or the pink one. I know I'm not doing anything fancy. Mostly I just wanted you to get an idea of how the shades perform. So I'm gonna go wash this all off and I will be back to give you a look with the neon orange palette, which is the one I thought from Swatches would perform the best, so we shall see. Alright, last eye look. Now we're going to use the neon orange palette, and I basically created this look with 3 brushes. Basically I started with the yellow. After that one I did the orange, then the peach, then the purple, and I applied the shade in the inner corner. I basically created the whole eye look with this, it's a Makeup Geek pointed crease brush. I'm really enjoying their brushes. They're actually on sale on their website. If you want to check them out, there's like an eye set. It's not super inexpensive, but the brushes are pretty nice. I got mine in a bundle off Hot Look, so you can maybe keep an eye on that as well. I'm just applying the soft ochre paint pot lightly. I covered up my highlight a little bit. I just used my face highlight, which is Benefit's Cookie. I'll reapply it when I'm done. So we're going to start out with this shade. And basically I'm just going to tap these colors all the way across my lid. I do have to go back and forth with a couple of them as I blend, but other than that, they really didn't give me any trouble. I did not set my paint pot, but that's a pretty dry eyeshadow base. So as you can see, I'm just using tapping and slightly pressing motions. Next shade is going to be that peachy one right there. And I'm going to overlap that a little bit with a yellow. And when I get into the crease area, I'm going to slightly use blending motions just back and forth so that the colors begin to blend. Next, we're going to go into this corally shade. And lastly, this magenta purple shade. Once the gradient is established, I just take a clean blending brush and I brush across the top of it. And the colors just blend together seamlessly. And with the same exact brush, I'm just going to repeat that in the lower lash line. This is my inner corner shade right here, and I use a Makeup Geek Outer V brush. And we finish it off with that eyeliner again. Getting a lot of use out of this eyeliner. I really like these. I actually prefer liners that you sharpen because I think you can keep them longer. That's basically it for creating the eye look. I'm just going to finish it off with mascara, and I will be back to give you my final thoughts on all 3 palettes. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing those demos. And just in general, do I think that they're a must-have? Not really, but I do think that they're unique. There's something a little bit different. I do like the packaging. I think they're really cute. I wish that she had incorporated some of those metallic, like the beautiful marbled shades from the new nude palette. Those are really amazing and definitely unique. These are going to be a little bit harder to work with. Again, just a little bit crumbly, a little bit more dry, and a little bit of a glitter fallout. So using them wet can kind of help you get around that, as well as doing your eye makeup first, which I did not do, and I think my eye makeup turned out okay. So let me know what you think about the palettes, if you picked up any of them, and what your experience has been with them. In the end, the decision is yours whether or not you think that they are going to be worth it. I think they're cute. Again, the orange and the green are my personal preferences, and my least favorite would have to be the pink one. That's everything for this overview video. If you did enjoy it and find it helpful, give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions I didn't address, leave those in the comment section down below. As always, I enjoy chit-chatting with you in the comment section. Otherwise, thank you so much for checking out my video. I hope you're doing really, really well, and I look forward to catching you again really, really soon on my next one. Bye-bye.